dork!
I want to start a series on this channel called It's Not As Good As You Think. The idea behind the series is to analyze anime and cartoon shows that are considered to be very popular, then break it down to show that despite its popularity, the show itself isn't that good when talking about quality, because popularity does not equate to quality. A show can have high quality content but not be popular, and a show can be popular but the content can be bland or just not very good. I got the idea for this series because of shows like Family Guy, The Simpsons, and Sword Art Online. These shows are very popular despite the general consensus that these shows aren't very good. The idea behind the series is not to talk about shows that are popular and shit on it. Shows I pick for this series will only be shows that are popular, but the content of the show is really only mediocre, or in some rare cases, not good in any sense. I'm not saying that if you like a show I pick for this series, that your taste in shows are bad. After all, the shows I will pick for these series are popular for a reason. So if you like a show I say isn't very good, that's okay. I'm not here to change your mind from watching a show you might like. The entire point of this series will be to show that popularity does not equate to high quality. So for the first episode, I'm going to choose a series I enjoy watching a lot, and that is Food Wars. I also think this is good timing since new episodes for the second half of Season 3 are coming out. So let's get into it. Food Wars. It's not as good as you think. Food Wars is a series that came out with a manga in 2012 and then with an anime in 2014. The manga is written by Yuto Sokura and illustrated by Shun Sayaki. I hope I pronounced those names correctly. And Yuki Murasaki also works as a collaborator, providing the recipes for the series. As a shonen series, the plot is fairly simple. Our main character, Soma Yukihira, works as a cook with his father at their small diner. Yukihira's father gets a new job that requires him to leave Japan and closes up the diner, but not without telling Yukihira to go to a prestigious culinary school called Totsuki Treehouse Culinary Academy, where only less than 1% of the students manage to graduate. Of course, he gets admitted into the school, and that is where the majority of the series takes place. Yukihira plans on becoming the best chef at his school because the way he sees it, he has experience working as a chef in a restaurant where most of the students have not. So he sees almost everyone else below him, which causes him to be the most hated student by his peers. And that is an oversimplification of the series. One thing that is important to mention is that there is a thing called shokugeki, where a student can challenge another student to basically a cook-off. Each student puts up a bet and states the food theme for this challenge. Whatever the student's bet is basically a verbal contract and almost nothing is off the table. A student can even bet their own residency at the school, which is something that has happened a few times in the series. Almost every shonen series is popular in one shape or form, and I can't state why the show is popular in Japan or if it even is, but I can speak as to why it's popular in America. The show came out with little to no competition when it came to animes about food, and food-themed shows are very popular here. There are tons of shows that are about food competition and foods around the world, so an anime about food would obviously be a hit, but it's what happens in the first episode that really kept people around for more. People like food, but people also love being able to recreate food they want to try for themselves. And that's the beauty of Food Wars. All the foods can be recreated, and in fact, recipes for the food from the series can be found in the manga. If the mouth-watering food didn't make people stay in tune for the next episode, it was the extreme amount of fan service. The first episode really gives the audience a taste of what they could expect from future episodes. Whenever a character bites into their food, you can expect their clothes to explode as they are shocked from the flavors that the dish can produce. Characters would often moan or breathe heavily as if they are having the best orgasm of their life. But if the dish is really amazing, we are given these funny scenes where characters are in this fantasy world that is related in some way to what the dish is about. If the dish involves honey, maybe the characters will be showered in honey, Or if the dish has fish in it, maybe the characters would be surrounded by the type of fish they just ate. These scenes are very humorous and contain a lot of fan service. And lastly is the action or cinematic scenes that the show is full of. Let's face it, cooking is fun, but it's boring to watch. Even food shows know that watching someone cook is boring. That's why these shows do jump cuts to show the more exciting parts of cooking, which is getting the ingredients and mixing them together, or the process of getting the food ready to be cooked on a pan or deep fried. A dish might take 40 minutes to be made with prep and cooking, but we only see something like 5 minutes of the person actually cooking. Food Wars found a way to make the cooking part actually exciting. The characters tend to possess inhuman abilities where they can mince, chop, and slice vegetables, fruits, and meats in a matter of seconds with no mistakes. Being animated, the show can make very dramatic still shots, use slow motion to emphasize certain motions, and give us dramatic angles and close ups of them cooking that a live action show simply cannot reproduce. With so many positives about the show, you might be wondering, how is it that the show isn't good as we think? Some of you might have noticed that I didn't add characters or the plot of the show in the previous section. The characters and plot are really important in a show's content quality. This is why plot changes or character replacements can kill a show. Nearly every character possesses a plain or stereotypical personality with no real character development. Even Yukihira has a bland personality, and shonen male leads usually have explosive personalities. The only time his goofy side is turned off is if he loses a cooking match or if someone talks down to another person because of their style of cooking. Despite being 3 seasons in, his character has grown very little, with him only acknowledging that he doesn't know more than other students about cooking like he once thought. Then we get to our secondary and side characters. They even have less character development than our main hero. Irna is your stuck-up Tsunade type of character who has grown very little as well. Even after we learn about her past, not much has changed other than us knowing why she is the way she is. Takumi Aldini just wants Yukihira to see him as the better chef, since he has declared Yukihira as his rival. Ikumi Mito acts like a Tsunade when around Yukihira ever since he beat her in a shokogeri. And the list goes on, but I'm not going to list every character. My main point is that the characters are very much one-dimensional. They haven't grown as a character really at all, and most of them have very little screen time, with most of the focus being on Yukihira. The show hardly has any interesting plot arcs and is very formulaic. Every episode in season 1 can be broken down like this. A challenge is introduced. It can be a school assignment, a shokogeri, or a school festival. The characters begin prep by thinking of how to complete the challenge. They make the food, and comes the fan service, and then the winner is declared. Next episode, rinse and repeat. Due to this formula, characters aren't given an opportunity to grow. A character getting any sort of development comes from them losing the challenge and learning a bit about themselves from the loss. Which is great, but that's where their character stops growing, keeping them as a one-dimensional character. And speaking of losing to a challenge, it's always easy to predict who will win or lose a shokogeri, especially when something like a residency is put on the line. Yukihira is the main character. The series would essentially end if he were to lose a match where he bet his own residency on the line. But it's easy to see him lose a match if nothing major is put on the line. I will give the show this. Despite season 1 following a formula for each episode, season 2 and 3 do move away from it, but that's when the fan service of the show starts to kill the quality. Season 2 and 3 tries to start having actual story arcs to the show, and episodes are more about prepping for their upcoming challenge. This is where the fan service isn't needed anymore for the show, but they continue to include it in. In fact, it actually hurts the show when they are trying to be serious and dramatic, but the tension is broken with the out of place and random fan service segments. And it's not like the show can get rid of it because the fans expect the fan service, but having to include it really does ruin the mood of the show when it wants to be serious. They're damned if they don't include it, and they're damned if they don't. Speaking of the story, while yes, it tries to implement story arcs in season 2 and 3, the plot is still fairly weak because the show wants us to focus on the food first and the story second. After all, season 2 was all about the autumn elections,
and there was no real plot that season.
With season 3, we have been given an interesting plot, but so far the show continues to follow the same formula of a challenge being introduced, prepping for the challenge, and then a predictable end result, depending on what's on the line. So, to sum up on why the show is average at best, characters are very one dimensional with little to no growth. Very much formulaic episodes. If you watch one episode, you've seen them all. Weak plots because the show is more about the food and story. And lastly, the fan service that hooked people in starts to become annoying and out of place as the show tries to be more serious and thematic. For this part, I actually want to argue against myself by bringing up things I believe people would bring up in the comments to counter my arguments. First off, the characters being one dimensional. Yukihira has grown as a character, but when you compare him from this season to the episodes from season 1, the only thing about him that has grown as a character is acknowledging that he has a lot to learn still and that he wants to learn so he can one day be his dad in a cook-off. Every other character have stayed virtually the same, where the only character growth they gain is from the episode where they are defeated by Yukihira or inspired by him, and that is where their development as a character ends. The only character that has gained true character development would be Megumi Tadakori because of how much she has changed compared to when she was first introduced. I don't count Erna because she hasn't grown yet, but does now understand that there are other ways to improve dishes.
Not every episode is predictable because of episode X.
Well, yes, there are a small handful of episodes where the outcome of a shokugiri has a surprising outcome. That doesn't excuse the fact that you can still easily predict about 9 out of 10 matches on how they will end, if you read the manga argument. For this series, I'm purely focusing on the anime unless I state otherwise. So if the manga has fixed my arguments, they don't count until the anime reaches that point. The anime does have an interesting story arc. The show doesn't have any real story arcs until the third season, when the show gets spiced up with the introduction of a new character, Irina's dad. Before that, you can almost compare the show to that of a slice of life. Nothing major happens in each episode, except for a few shokugiri challenges that served as a learning lesson for Yukihira, or in some cases, Megumi. And that's all the counter arguments I can think of. Food Wars. When it comes to content quality, I would compare it to an average show that lacks any real depth. Food Wars might not be amazing, but at least the show doesn't lack any substance or is harmful. And by harmful, I mean it doesn't have a bad message or is so lowbrow that only kids should find it funny. The show is entertaining, and like I said earlier, it's a show I enjoy watching, and it's okay if you like it too. But when you think about it, Food Wars is not as good as you think. Do you agree with me or not? Let me know in the comments down below. And what do you think about this series?
I have a few other shows in mind for future episodes, so any feedback would be a great help.
Thank you for watching, and my name is Doku, and this is Dorks being Dorks.